What if the most important success of your life hasn't happened yet? Not in your 20s, not in your so-called prime, but after the age when society quietly starts treating you like the interesting part is over. Strange idea, isn't it? Spend decades working, stressing, paying bills, collecting disappointments, only to be told the best years are already behind you. History has a habit of laughing at that idea. There's a strange pressure built into modern life. By a certain age, you're supposed to have it all figured out, career established, savings building, reputation secured. And if you reach your 50s, 60s, or even retirement age without some grand success story, people quietly act as if the most important chapters are already behind you. But history tells a very different story. Again and again, some of the most remarkable people did not succeed because they started early. They succeeded because they refused to believe their useful years had expired. Take Harlan Sanders. Long before he became the face of KFC, his life looked nothing like success. He worked as a farmhand, a streetcar conductor, a railroad fireman, an insurance salesman, and several other jobs that never turned into stability. At one point, he ran a small service station in Corbin, where he started cooking meals for travelers passing through. That tiny kitchen became the beginning of something bigger. People loved his fried chicken. But life didn't suddenly become easy. A new interstate highway eventually redirected traffic away from his restaurant. Business collapsed. He was in his 60s, nearly broke, and living mostly on a small government check. That could have been the end of the story. Instead, he packed up his pressure-cooked chicken recipe and began driving from town to town. He reportedly slept in his car. He knocked on restaurant doors. He faced rejection again and again. Not 10 times, not 50, hundreds of times. Imagine that. An older man, long past the age society calls prime, going door to door asking strangers to believe in an idea. Most people see the white suit. They see the global brand. What they don't see is a man in his 60s betting everything he had left on one last attempt. That attempt became one of the most recognizable food businesses in the world. Then there's Grandma Moses. For most of her life, there was nothing glamorous about it. She worked on farms, raised children, managed a household, and lived the kind of life history usually ignores. She had always enjoyed creative work, especially embroidery, but in her late 70s, arthritis made it too painful to continue. That's often the moment when people assume options are narrowing. Instead, she adapted. She picked up a paintbrush. At first, she painted simple rural scenes, snowy villages, farms, children playing, harvests, everyday American life. Nothing flashy, just memories. But those memories carried something powerful. They carried honesty. Her paintings began attracting attention. Eventually, her work was discovered by collectors and art dealers. And suddenly, a woman who began painting seriously in her late 70s became one of the most beloved folk artists in America. Think about that. She didn't become successful by trying to become younger. She became successful by turning a lifetime of memories into something only age could have created. Now consider Laura Ingalls Wilder. Her early life was not literary glamour. It was frontier hardship, family moves, farm work, financial uncertainty, survival. For years, she lived what looked like a completely ordinary life. Marriage, children, household responsibilities, daily labor. Nothing about it suggested global literary success. But she had something valuable. She had lived through stories. Not invented stories, lived ones. For decades, those memories simply stayed with her. Then, in her 60s, she began turning those experiences into writing. At 65, she published Little House in the Big Woods, and suddenly the details of a difficult childhood on the American frontier became stories read by generations of children around the world. What makes that powerful is not just that she published late, it's that the very years that looked ordinary were actually the source material. The life itself became the work. And right about here, maybe you're thinking, so what's the official retirement plan then? Work for 40 years, collect stress like a hobby, develop mysterious back pain, and then get politely told your best years were apparently 3 decades ago? That would be funny if history keeps proving the exact opposite. So what connects all of these people? It wasn't luck alone. It wasn't youth. It wasn't perfect timing. It was accumulated life. Years of failure, years of invisible practice, years of experience that didn't look impressive at the time. And then one day, those years finally had somewhere to go. That matters because a lot of people quietly carry the same fear. Maybe you've worked for decades and wonder if it added up to anything. Maybe you're nearing retirement and thinking the best opportunities belong to younger people. Maybe you feel behind. These stories challenge that fear, because maybe you are not behind. Maybe you are still gathering what you need. Harlan Sanders needed decades of failure before he found the one thing worth betting on. Grandma Moses needed decades of life before she had something worth painting. Laura Ingalls Wilder needed decades of memory before she had stories worth telling. That's the lesson. A slow beginning is not a failed life. A late breakthrough is still a breakthrough, and sometimes the years you think were ordinary were actually preparation. So if you feel like time is running out, remember this. Some people bloom early, some people bloom late, but late does not mean lesser. Sometimes the second half of life is not where the story fades. Sometimes it's where the story finally becomes unforgettable.